It's my pleasure to introduce our next speaker. Brian Barron is the CEO of the Ontario Construction Secretariat, and I know this organization quite well. I was former CEO there myself. And the Ontario Construction Secretariat is a joint labor management organization that does cutting-edge research, joint labor management organization dedicated 100% to the advancement of the unionized construction industry in Ontario. And they do that through cutting-edge research on market share, on the union safety effect. And as I go across the country and talk to different provincial councils and different affiliates, many provinces ask me, how can we do this in our province? How can we get information on market share? How can we get information on the union safety effect? And so I thought it'd be a fantastic opportunity to hear from Brian today on the work that they're doing in these two specific files to help better inform us, and so that we can also learn how we can advance these initiatives in other jurisdictions across the province. So please join me in providing a nice warm welcome to Brian Barron, the CEO of Ontario Construction Secretariat.
Good morning, and thank you. That saves me the preamble to the OCS. Thank you for giving me a moment to showcase some of the work that we're doing at the Ontario Construction Secretariat. The study that I'm going to be talking to you guys about today, there's actually a couple parts to it, but it's something we undertook to really kind of help to level the playing field and promote the union advantage. Now, if we can just pull up the slide deck. Okay, so 2 years ago, we engaged Prism Economics and Analysis to examine the union involvement in the ICI sector. The goal was to see where we were doing well and where we might like to spend a bit more time developing or potentially even recapturing certain areas. Now, as you can imagine, this is far easier said than done. Generally speaking, there is no mandatory registration for every trade on every site. To add to this, you've got union sites, non-union sites, and then you've got hybrids, so combinations of both. So it's certainly a tall order and very difficult to get a handle on. Now, due to time, I'm only going to give you sort of a high-level overview of one aspect of the project, but I think one of the more important sides of things. Now, the parts that we're not covering today look at areas, types, and sizes of projects union GCs do well with. And to oversimplify the great work that has been done by Prism, the report ultimately suggests that unionized GCs do really well with large projects. I'm sure there's no surprise. So although we may not be getting the majority of the project in ICI, the report really suggests that we're getting sort of that larger size and higher complexity. Now, we hope to use this information to look at some of the successes right across the province in an effort to really apply those lessons to areas that we might be interested in going after. Now, to answer one big question for you, and I know Sean had sort of alluded to market share, I can't tell you what union market share is, and over the next couple slides, it will become apparent why. Now, the focus of today's discussion is on publicly tendered bids. Prism looked at past 3 years of data from sites like BidMax, bids and tenders, and that sort of thing. The projects ranged from about $10,000 up to about $300 million. Now, keep in mind, some of the projects were single trade type projects, so things like roof replacement and that sort of thing. But the majority of the projects, we really could only see who the GC was. So from our data, we could see how many unionized GCs got work versus union or CLAC. But the data gives no indication of individual sub-trades. So if a non-union contractor hired a unionized contractor, we'd have no way of seeing that. And that's why this report really can't be viewed as a market share report, just because we simply just don't have the visibility of what every trade is doing in every part of the province. Now, the report really looked at 3 years worth of data. We reviewed 12,000 bidders over 2,200 projects. So it averaged out to about 5.5 bids per project. We found that 91% of publicly tendered projects were awarded through low bid. I'm sure that's not overly surprising to many of you, but to really put this into perspective, that equates to 97% of the total project value going to low bid. And I think that should be alarming, and that's the piece that we're really kind of attaching ourselves onto. Now, that low bid was an average of 15% lower than the median bid, so widely regarded as the market value of construction. And I don't know about you guys, but I don't know of too many contractors that can eat 15 points. So there's a pretty big spread there between what's actually being awarded and what the actual contract or the construction value is. Now, previous studies that the OCS has done shows that low bid mentality leads to predatory bidding, ultimately distorting the true cost of construction. So the question then is, why are they defaulting to that low bid? The short answer is taxpayer accountability. Low bid offers an elegant justification for on-the-surface alignment with fiscal responsibility. Another argument used is that greater competition drives more competitive pricing. And I'm sure most of you guys are rolling your eyes at this point because we all know that that ultimately isn't true. Low bid is often achieved through buying the project, through the perception of ultimately getting a deal. So that's the piece that the taxpayers are really grabbing onto. But now what we know is that it's going to result in higher escalation through extras, contract disputes, and then ultimately litigation. Now, unfortunately, this practice can attract unqualified bidders and occasionally immoral GCs. But ultimately, it's not reflective of the quality that we should be demanding of our public projects. So what's the OCS doing about it? Last year, we attended the Association of Municipalities of Ontario conference just over the river, and we really brought a couple tools for folks. Now, I also spoke at one of their events on the results of our study in an effort to move them off of low bid and towards best value. What I heard from the mayors and councillors was very telling, is that they just didn't know how to do it differently. They lacked the capacity to be able to actually evaluate the bids on really the quality of the actual bid, and they lacked the knowledge to effectively justify to the taxpayers why best value bid is better than low bid. So we seek to correct that. Now, we are going to be attending again this year. We're hoping to present to them in a more meaningful way. We think that they've got the message, so fingers crossed that we're actually going to get in there to do the full presentation this time around. But what you see up on the slide here is our first step at changing this behavior. So our next steps are continuing. It goes actually much further past this. We're going to be launching a much larger PR campaign this year, really focused on targeting buyers of publicly funded projects with the focus on giving them the tools to help justify best value and market value of construction. So we're really trying to kind of educate them so that they can talk to the taxpayers. Now, the one pager entitled Building Trust and Procurement, so it's actually the first two pages on your guys' left, really isn't anything new. It simply reinforces evaluating bids on various criteria, including experience and past performance, company or organization, health and safety, contractor capacity, management capabilities, project control procedures, geographic location, and of course, financial stability. With these being publicly funded projects, we're never going to get away from that financial question mark. But the idea and the driving force behind this is to get them closer to that best value, that market value price for construction. Now, all these things are virtually in every procurement and pre-qualification recommendation that's out there. Many of you have probably written documents on this sort of thing as guidance. What this really tells me is that this isn't an information issue. This is more of a communication and understanding one. They just lack the ability to actually convey that and properly evaluate the bids. So how is ours different? So in addition to the one page at the front and the back, we also set out to answer some of those questions with some of the previous reports and studies that we've done. So every year we look at investment and training. Last year, the building trades in Ontario invested over $70 million in the ICI training fund. Now, obviously, there's a lot more money that goes into that with all of the other subsectors within construction, but we only get visibility on the ICI side. They have more than 100 union employer training centers, 47 of which have training delivery agent status. We also have 81 apprenticeship programs and complete more apprentices than anyone else. This answers the capacity, qualification, organization, and location questions. So bottom line here is no one can provide the number of highly skilled workers like we can. Our system is built on it, and each of you have invested heavily in it. All of you are involved in this side of it, and it's also reflected in the announcement from yesterday. Now, in addition to that, every few years, we also conduct a union health and safety effects study. The last time we did this study, we found that building trades unions are 31% safer, and they have 31% lower lost time injury claims, 29% lower incidence of critical injury claims, and 25% lower incidence of MSDs. This promotes the health and safety management that you guys are very much behind. It reinforces the advocacy behind the internal responsibility system. But importantly, for this part of the discussion, it also serves to lower the risk for the project owner. And I can tell you, after having been the head of construction health and safety for the province of Ontario for a number of years, it very much shows in the unionized environment. So this is something that comes through very clearly. Now, that risk discussion is key. Public entities are conservative by nature, and I believe that ultimately our leverage in this is around risk mitigation. And we need to position really kind of our sales pitch here around unionized projects being ones where ultimately owners don't have to worry about that risk side of things. And it also demonstrates value through being able to deliver projects on time and on budget. Now, that only leaves a few categories of the pre-qualification where the owner will need to weigh the GC on the reputation and their fit with the culture. So much of that really comes down to references and similar types of works done, but it also comes down to price. Now, that is up to the contractor to sell. That's not something that we can do necessarily in this room. That's something that they're going to be doing through their bid documents. But this is where the competitive advantage should be found after all other things are equal. So when we take a look at the capacity, culture, and ability, once all of those are weighed out equally against one another, all of those contractors, then we should be taking a look at the price. And that's the message that we're taking to the municipalities, is making sure that they're looking at price last, and then that can be the deciding factor after everything else has been given the proper weighting. So what are we ultimately trying to tell them? We're telling them that we invest in our people to bring you the best quality and the safest work around. We're basically the lowest risk that's out there. So that's really the idea behind this. Now, in line with some of the other work that we've done, ultimately we are advocating for an objective pre-qualification process that truly examines the contractor's ability to carry out the project in a safe and efficient manner, and not just an evaluation based on price alone. But what we do know from previous studies is that when owners do employ a pre-qualification process, it will result in lower cost escalation, lower risk, and higher end quality. All of these are tenets of any publicly funded project. This really should be the expectation of how our public dollars are spent, not looking for that bargain. So we expect that quality and longevity out of that product. And I think that's the piece that we really need to harness when we take a look at this. Now, when we look at public money, it should go back to supporting those communities. We've heard that. We've talked a little bit about community benefit today, as well as yesterday. But it's really kind of looking at those good paying jobs, that fair wage, the community benefit, and ultimately getting that vested interest by workers in their own communities. It's that sense of pride piece. Everybody in this room has it. I certainly have it. I think my family's sick of hearing about the projects that I've built. They want me to shut up about it. But bottom line is I feel very proud about that kind of thing, and there is a huge value to that. All of this ultimately leads to better relationships between all parties through ensuring that contractors are awarded ensuring that the contractors who are awarded the contracts are actually capable of carrying out the work. But it also reinforces that we need contractors of an appropriate size and with the required experience to be able to carry this out. It favors contractors who have ultimately earned the ability to bid on those jobs, and not the ones who are just out there rolling the dice and just giving it a shot. Is it more onerous than low bid? 100% it is. Nobody's going to argue that, and that's where our challenge ultimately comes. That's the barrier that we have to overcome. But is it superior to low bid? Absolutely it is. You know, when I take a look at it, I've talked to Australia, Singapore, even in Ontario, the Ministry of Transportation has a robust pre-qualification system. All of the results are very positive. We need to get everybody else on board with this. Now, fortunately, and kind of unfortunately at the same time, we have numerous examples of publicly funded projects going bad. Now, for those of you from Ontario in here, you've likely heard about the city of Sudbury. What happened there, unfortunately, there was an elderly woman that was killed on a road project. It was a result of poor traffic protection and barriers and that sort of stuff. The city of Sudbury was drawn into that investigation as an employer. They spent years in court. Ultimately, they got off, but bottom line is when we look at that, that sent every municipality in the province reeling. So now is really the critical time to be pushing that message out there. They're at the point where they are listening, they understand the risk, they've seen it firsthand, so it is a good time for that messaging. Unfortunately, it took an unfortunate fatality for that to happen, but we are at a point where the message is resonating. Now, a lot of the studies that are up here, these have been done in the past. Nothing's really changed. What's changed at this point is we now have the study and the data to show how pervasive that low bid mentality is, and that's the piece that we're really capitalizing on. So with that, I would like to thank you. I will be here for the duration of the conference. I also have our Director of Research, Catherine Jacobs, with me as well, who has been really kind of the driving force behind a lot of these studies. So we'd love to hear from you guys. If you've got any questions about what the OCS does or any of our reports, we'd be happy to talk to you. Thank you.